From the Oklahoman newsroom, it's time for an OU update. I'm Jenny Carlson here in studio with fellow columnist Barry Trammell and OU beat writer Ryan Aber. Time for an extended look at Sooner basketball, guys. And right now the look is not all that good. Ryan, another loss for the Sooners as they go to Lubbock. The road struggles continue. The struggles continue. I mean, it's kind of top to bottom at this point. What if you're diagnosing what ails the Sooners? Where do you go first?
Well, it's really hard to because each of these games have been different, especially that game the other night was different because in that game Oklahoma got off to a decent start. They had a little bit of a lead. They just didn't get anything from the outside from Trae Young, who missed every one of his three-pointers for the first time this season. And then also late in the game, they had foul trouble all along the perimeter, even at the 4 with Christian Doolittle, and that changed how they had to play defense that last 5 minutes, and it affected them, no doubt, over the end. In some games, it's been Brady Manick who struggled from outside. That was the case again on Tuesday in Lubbock. But I thought they actually played better defense overall in that game than they had in a while. It just sort of fell apart on them in the end. Yeah.
Barry, can you diagnose it? Is there one or two issues in your mind that's making these Sooners not look so good right now?
Well, I mean, I might start with Trae Young's three-point shooting. Is it 1 of 17 the last 2 games? I mean, they're not going to beat anybody with Trae going 1 of 17. I mean, that's like Baker Mayfield going 7 of 22 passing. It's not going to work. You got to have that three-point shot from Trae Young, especially when he takes that many. So that needs to get ironed out. Trae's got to play better. He knows that. Everybody knows that. I agree with Bobby Hebert. The defense was better. That was actually a fairly promising game. Texas Tech's a legitimate top 10 team.
Really
I mean, you're on the road at Lubbock. The crowd's crazy. It's full. They're having a great season, one of the best in school history. They can win the Big 12 championship. They're fighting for what could be a #1 seed. They got a really good team. They got a coach that knows what he's doing in Chris Beard. And it's a tie game with 7 minutes left. So the Sooners played a pretty solid game. To me, that was encouraging. They didn't get it done down the stretch, but they played better than in some of these other games we've seen during this slump.
You know, Ryan, Barry mentions Trae Young's three-point shooting, and when we've seen Trae have struggles in the past, lots of times it's been almost like he flipped a switch. You know, when he turned it over too much against OSU, the very next game it was all about the passing, and he found everybody and just had an amazing night. It's almost like he's come right back and fixed whatever was wrong. We're not seeing that right now. He's having these struggles. Do you get a sense this is a fatigue issue, a pressure issue, what other teams are doing defensively? What do you sort of, when you think about Trae having those struggles, what's it come down to in your mind?
Well, I think it's the first and the last thing that you mentioned. I think fatigue plays a part of it. He's playing more games than he has at any point in his career. And a lot of those were falling short, those three-point shots. That's a sign that maybe he's tiring out a little bit. I think the problem is his general philosophy to fixing things has been attack it and jump right into doing whatever he struggled with, and that can exacerbate a fatigue issue. I think for them it's good to have this week from Tuesday to Saturday, maybe get them a little bit of a break. They were off Wednesday, which they virtually always are, but next week especially, they've got the Monday game, and then they won't play again until that next Saturday. I think that maybe gives him a time to catch his breath a little bit. He said he still feels pretty good about his shot, but he's got to start making some of those fall in order to make this offense work. And the other thing you mentioned was the defense, the way teams have attacked him. They have denied him at every opportunity, and I think the Sooners are still figuring out ways to work around that with their offense, and part of that is moving the ball away from him and having it naturally flow back to him instead of forcing it back into Trae Young's hands too early. And I think that they're starting to adjust to that a little bit. They haven't figured it out all the way, though.
Barry, if you're Trae Young, what do you do? Do you say, I need a break? Do you try to go to the gym and get extra shots? I mean, what's the answer right now when it comes to Trae Young getting back to the Trae Young we saw for so much of this season?
Well, I mean, I think he's just going to have to play his way through it. What's happening, Trae Young hasn't lost his shot. What's happened is he had a great non-conference. He gets to the conference season, and all of a sudden you're playing more consistently. You're playing good teams. The Sooners had a good non-conference schedule, but you're playing better teams on a nightly basis. Yeah. This is a strange Big 12 year in that everybody's good. The worst team in the Big 12 is actually pretty good, Iowa State. So there's no night that's off. you're playing coaches built for defense, know what they're doing, so you got an automatic sort of wall put up, and then you start playing those guys again. So not only you're playing against coaches and defenses that sort of have an idea how to stop you, well, they get a second bat. It's like, you know, it's like going through the batting order second time around. So it's just going to be difficult. And when a team is so ball dominant with one player, then coaches can really focus in and do some things. Clearly, his teammates are going to have to help him, and I thought they did Tuesday night in Lubbock. McGusty played well. Christian James had a monster game. I thought he got some help from those guys. He just played poorly himself. The one thing I might suggest to Trae Young, and I hope I'm not being facetious, I'd like to see him shoot more normal three-pointers. So many of his three-pointers are not just back, but way back. And, you know, what if he tried more 24-footers instead of 31-footers? Take a couple of those long ones. He's made them. He can make them, but try some 24-footers, see what happens.
When it seemed like Tuesday, some of those three-pointers he would try to answer on the other end. Texas Tech would hit a three-pointer, and he would come down, and it'd almost be like he had to let a three-pointer fly.
Emotionalism almost.
Yeah, and a couple of those long three-pointers there, especially early in the second half, he had two just within a span of like 45 seconds a minute after Tech had hit three-pointers on the other end. Not be so reactionary. If those long three-pointers come during the course of the way you run your offense, or just you know, drive down and pull up because it's open, that's fine. He's hit those, but don't do them just to feel like you've got to answer on the other end, because all that does is wind up burying you in a deeper hole.
We'll talk about the emotion at Texas Tech here in a second, but Barry mentions the help, Ryan, and we talked about Cam McGusty a week or so ago and how he was really struggling to the point that you know, he was basically being benched in situations where we expected him to play a pretty significant role. It looks like maybe he turned a corner or might be getting back on track. It looks like at least we've seen some signs of life out of Cam McGusty.
Yeah, I thought he was fantastic on Tuesday night in Lubbock, and he really hadn't done anything. The two previous games of that, he hadn't had any shots, only played 10 combined minutes. In that Iowa State game, he didn't play. He only played 4 minutes, and the only reason he played those 4 is because Rashard Odoms found himself in foul trouble, and they had already gone through some of their backup guards, so they needed somebody just to throw out there, and that's really all he was sort of an afterthought. But McGusty last year was fantastic for them, being able to hit outside and be aggressive toward the rim. Now, on Tuesday, his offense came from those three-pointers, which hadn't been falling for him. They did finally fall. I think what they need from him, though, is to get back to being aggressive and attack, sort of the way that Rashard Odoms has done in his offensive resurgence.
Do you guys feel like for the Sooners moving forward, do they need more of Cam McGusty to play like that, or do they need Brady Manick to get back on track? I mean, I think both those guys are important, but Barry, do you get a sense of if the Sooners are going to be better, which one of those guys needs to get going?
Well, probably Manick. He's going to play more. He's been a much bigger sidekick than McGusty. The thing that McGusty gives them is they were getting down to the point where they only had about 6 guys they could count on, the 5 starters and McNeese. And, you know, Lon Kruger looks at his bench and says, who do I put in? He literally didn't want to play McGusty at all on Saturday in Ames. He played, what, 4 minutes, I think.
Yeah, 4 minutes, and it was just because Odoms got in foul trouble.
Right, exactly. So he was really down. So that's going to help. But Manick's going to play 28 minutes a game, and he's going to have to make some shots. So they need Manick to get going, especially on the road. He's been not any good on the road. So the truth is they're not a deep enough team where they can sustain multiple people playing poorly. They need Doolittle to play well. They need McGusty to play well. They need Manick to play well.
Yep. All right, guys, I mentioned the atmosphere in Lubbock. Ryan, you were there. Only reporter from this market to go to Lubbock. It was a homecoming game for Trae Young, although I don't think they rolled out any sort of welcome mat for him. It did not seem like.
No, they really didn't. And in the second half, and this started early in the game, Trae Young got booed every time he touched the ball, which Trae Young gets attention from opposing student sections, opposing crowds, but I thought that this, from the start, was a little bit more. He's never been booed every single time he touches the ball the way he was in Lubbock. And then in the second half, when Texas Tech started to take control, The Texas Tech student crowd started a pretty vulgar chant, something you, Trae Young. That was, I believe it was audible on the broadcast. It was definitely audible in the arena, especially with their student section sort of surrounding OU's bench. And in the middle of that is Rayford Young, who's Trae's father, who was a star at Texas Tech, revered there. And they've had this string of former Texas Tech players that they brought out onto center court during the course of the game. Virtually every time out, they had another former Texas Tech player out there. No mention of Rayford Young in his first game back there in quite a while. Rayford was wearing neutral colors, was wearing a blue and white shirt, which I thought was interesting. But it was a pretty brutal night crowd-wise in Lubbock. And it's interesting because a couple things got thrown onto the floor at various points. One time Chris Beard sort of stormed over and looked like he wanted to grab the mic, but nobody did anything when that chant started.
Well, Barry, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned Chris Beard, because that was made obvious a couple different places that I saw that, you know, at least for the throwing on the court, Barry, the items he did, he made it pretty clear he didn't want that. But is there anything that Texas Tech or any school can do, or any conference can do in situations like that, where you know, something might not be stopping the game, but it might be beyond sort of the bounds of sportsmanship that you would like your fans to display?
Well, the only way you can stop it is if you have an administration. And if you don't have an administration, there's no way to stop it. If you have a president of your university, you can stop it. If you have a vice president of your university, you can stop it. If you have a athletic director, you can stop it. If you have a dean of students, you can stop it. If you have a head coach, you can stop it. Now, if you don't have those things, you can't stop it. It's just mass chaos. And I'm not even really talking about just colleges. Same thing goes at pro events, other places where we've let societal norms fly away. But, I mean, think about it. If you go to the mall and there's people chanting profane things, we put a stop to it. If you go out in the street, if somebody comes out here in the downtown Oklahoma City, a group of people just starts chanting profane things, it's not going to last 15 seconds. The cops will be here. But you go to a ball game, we just let them do whatever they want to. It's low class, it's low rent, it's not just Tech, it happens in places we care about. I will say this, what's interesting to me, I'm not going to say the NFL because I don't know that that's necessarily true, but at NBA games, well, the Thunder, you don't hear that kind of stuff at Thunder games. I don't know why. You go to a bastion of what's supposed to be enlightened thinking, college campuses, and everything goes away. But you can stop it in literally 15 seconds. I mean, somebody, the vice president, whoever, can walk over and say, you know, make the announcement. Next person that yells something is leaving the building, 1, or getting expelled from school, 2. It ends immediately if you want to, but you don't want to.
So is this an issue that the Big 12 needs to address, guys? I mean, if Tech didn't step forward, nobody took a stand. And as Barry said, this isn't just a Tech problem. I mean, we've heard it probably everywhere at some point in time. Maybe not to the long duration, and maybe not directed at one person like happened at Tech. So I don't want to finger them. But is this something the Big 12 needs to look at, guys?
Well, I think they probably should take a look at what to do in the future about things like this. I mean, they've talked about what to do in court storming situations and made that a less relevant thing with fines and various other punishments. And I think it's certainly something to look at moving forward, how to handle things like this, because it was, like Barry said, pretty low rent to do that. I mean, Trae Young is a very polarizing figure in college basketball.
Sure.
A lot of opposing fan bases don't like him, but this was at another level, and I think they should probably look into making sure that this doesn't happen down the road.
And let me give you an example. Let's go to your alma mater. I was at a game 23 years ago at Allen Fieldhouse, and the Kansas fans did not get profane the day that Bryant Reeves went scoreless. Kansas and OSU into the season showdown for the Big 12, Big 8 title, and Big Country is scoreless late in the game. Kansas winning big, and the KU fans, Reeves has 0, Reeves has 0. They didn't chant it long because they were stopped. And you know who stopped them? Roy Williams stopped them. He went out on the court and demonstratively said, enough. And there are people on college campuses that can put a stop to this. I actually think the Big 12's powerless. I mean, most conferences' headquarters are powerless. The Big 12 especially. I mean, we've got encyclopedias to prove that the Big 12 doesn't do much over at schools. It's up to the administrators at schools and the leadership at schools. They can stop it if they want to.
All right, guys. Speaking of polarization, I mean, Trae Young, obviously, I feel like while we are talking OU basketball, he's obviously a huge part of this. But there seems to have been, and it's not just at Tech, seems like there's a bit of a backlash. And I mean, there was so much talk about Trae Young for the first 2 or 3 months of this season. Now it even seems like ESPN, I think I saw some tweets that they had sort of poking a little bit of fun at Trae Young and some of the struggles he was having at Tech. It seems like even the people that have built him up may have started to suffer a little bit of Trae Young overload. Are you guys getting a sense like, I mean, I don't know what you do about it at this point. The guy's the best player in college basketball by most people's estimations on this, but does it even become a backlash by the people that have loved him for so long, Ryan?
Well, I saw the tweet you're talking about, and it was pretty ridiculous. It was just one of Trae Young's turnovers that he has during courses of games for a lot of reasons. One, because he's aggressive in trying to find passing lanes. Two, because he has the ball in his hands so often. Yes, he needs to cut down on turnovers, but I thought for ESPN to tweet that out was pretty absurd, given the fact of how complicit they have been in building this guy up. And I know, and it's just what we do in the media, build people up and write about them a lot. Heck, I've written about Trae Young more than anybody over the last few months.
Yeah.
But it's gotten to the point where Trae Young is the topic of discussion during every basketball broadcast on ESPN, not just OU broadcast, not just Big 12 broadcast. You watch a college basketball game and there's going to be some Trae Young discussion. During Oklahoma games, the last couple, there's been a ticker right above the score on ESPN that has shown how many points, how many rebounds, how many assists Trae Young has. And there are people who get sick of it. I mean, we saw the backlash that Tim Tebow got when he was so good at Florida, and the reaction that other fan bases had to him. And I think that's what we're seeing with Trae Young now.
Barry, do you think any of this, whether it's the situation at Tech with the chanting, some of this backlash, the way Trae Young's playing, everything that's on the table right now, I think most of us believed not too long ago that Trae Young was definitely playing his only season at Oklahoma. Does any of this change any of that in your mind?
No. If Trae had still had the incredible success, was still playing great, OU still ranked 4th or 5th, I still think he's going pro. If everything was different, he's going pro. LeBron James spoke the truth earlier this week when somebody said he's got a decision to make, and James said he does not have a decision to make. Does Trae Young? Here's the deal. If Trae Young stayed in college 3 years, it'd be fabulous. It'd be a great experience for Trae Young. He'd have a blast. He'd set records. He'd be a star. It'd be a fabulous life. But he's going to a better life. He's going to go play games where Chris Beard hasn't dedicated the entire Texas Tech athletic department to smothering him for 40 minutes. He's going to go play games where people are going to guard him one-on-one. He's going to play games where if he makes a nice pass, it's somebody that can throw the ball in the basket. And he's not going to have to get up and go to biology class. And they're going to pay him big money to do that. Yeah. It's not a decision to be made. And LeBron, sometimes you need somebody like LeBron to say, hey, everybody wake up. This is clear cut.
Well, and Barry, first of all, you're right. It was funny. I actually this morning read the story I wrote a year ago. I think it was a year ago Friday when Trae Young committed to OU. And one of the paragraphs I wrote was that at the next level, Trae Young isn't likely to see junk defenses designed just to stop him, which of course lasted about, what, two and a half weeks?
Yeah, maybe.
And then you started seeing boxing ones and all kinds of junk defenses. I'm fairly confident, I will say this, in the NBA, Trae Young is not going to see junk defenses designed just to stop him.
Probably not going to try to trap him at half court.
No.
Or probably not.
No, start guarding him before the ball is even inbounded. Okay, guys, before we get out of here, let's talk about NCAA tournament, because as the Sooners have struggled, I think, at one point people were starting to hit the panic button and it seemed premature. Now it's starting to seem a little bit more like something's wrong with this team, and it may not get fixed anytime soon. The NCAA Tournament Selection Committee announced that right now, at the last selection that they did, OU's a 4 seed. Ryan, that's a pretty high mark, but obviously losing does not help your situation. What is worst case scenario right now for the Sooners?
Well, I mean, heck, worst case scenario is they lose their next 5, they lose in the first round of the Big 12 tournament, and probably don't make the NCAA tournament. I don't think that's going to happen.
Sure.
Like we've talked about over the last couple of games, I think there's some signs that they can get these things turned around, especially Tuesday. They played a really good Texas Tech team on the road. We're in that game with 5 minutes left. But if you keep losing these games and you lose, say, 4 of these last 6, then it gets to the point where you're playing as a 8 seed, 9 seed, a 10 seed, and you give yourself a really tough first round game against a team that's virtually evenly matched with you, and in the second round you've got to play either 1 or a 2 seed. I think that's something that Oklahoma would do well to avoid, and they've got to start stringing some wins together. They host Texas on Saturday at 11 a.m. That's a winnable game, even though Texas beat them in Austin. Then they go to Allen Fieldhouse, really difficult to win there. Then things lighten up a little bit with home games against K-State and Iowa State down the stretch. They do have that road game against Baylor. Baylor's playing really well right now, but they really need to win at least 2 or 3 of these games down the stretch to sort of right the ship.
Barry, as Ryan said, obviously worst case scenario is, not winning another game. That doesn't seem likely, but where do you sort of peg, your level of concern as it relates to where the Sooners are in their NCAA tournament hopes?
I'd recommend winning twice here in the last 5 games. If OU loses 4 out of 5, they finish 7-11 in the Big 12. I don't recall a team with that poor of a conference record ever making the NCAA tournament. There might have been an ACC team once make it at 6-10. I'll have to look that up. But you go 7-11, and that's a hard sell to the committee, especially considering OU would be 1-8 on the back half of the conference season.
Yeah.
Now, the committee no longer factors in as one of its metrics by design last 10 games of the season. But it's got to be in their heads, hey, this team doesn't win anymore. They're just not successful. If you go 7-11, and then you go to Kansas City, at that point, heck, you might play a first-round game. You might play in the 7, 8, 9, 10 game. And if you lose 4 out of 5, there's no reason to think you'll win in Kansas City.
Yeah.
I think they need to win twice to put all doubt aside. I think they can do that. The schedule actually is finally going to lighten up. They get, K-State, Texas, and Iowa State at home.
Right.
Yeah.
That's 3 home games you ought to win, and then you take your chances on your 2 road games. But the schedule has lightened up for them. Maybe they can find some success down the stretch and at least get a decent seed. But if they don't start winning, by all means, it's on the table that they get left out.
All right, guys, it starts on Saturday at Lloyd Noble. Texas comes to town, 11 o'clock tip on ESPN. Stay right here. We'll have all your coverage of that. Both these guys will be there on Saturday to give you full coverage. So be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com every day in the Oklahoman.